Kia ora koutou. It's the 2nd of October 2016. As you can see on the slide in front of you, I'm going to just reflect on a presentation that I did a while back. Thank you. Please find the following format. Next, an introduction. Second of all, kaupapa 1, reflection points 1. Number 3, kaupapa 2, reflection points 2. Number 4, conclusion. Hello everyone. As I've already commented online, Luke and I came across from Taupo and spent the whole time at the student noho. For us, as I said, a very challenging from where we were coming from, but very important to acknowledge the scholarship that I had received or been allocated, and part of our kaupapa Māori approach. It was important that we stayed the whole time. I would like to have stayed longer after the presentation, but it felt right to leave not long after. It was great to meet the other students and to whakawhanaungatanga. A lot of learning, a lot of growth for Luke and I was very pleased with his behaviour and how we got on with everyone, and that's important to me. It was, as I said, probably the best presentation I've ever done, for a lot of reasons, mainly because of the huge challenge of going from one world to the other. Nerve-wracking in terms of post-traumatic stress, and I felt that the balancing all the elements that were at play, and there were quite a lot. There were, as I've shared with other students, when you've been doing this sort of thing for many years, you pick up on vibes, you are watching and observing everything, and this gives me an opportunity to reflect, and thank you for listening. Kia ora. Yes, I'm back and I'm reflecting, and it's important to be truthful in providing my viewpoint. There was a lot at play here, and I, being aware as a learner that I needed to get in there as quick as I could to advance my own competencies, to build up to that presentation. A lot of work I had been done, and I want to share that. When I first arrived, what happens for people like me is we are coping with a lot of internal things that are happening, and Luke had gone into the to the noho centre, where the beds are, the mattresses are. I went into the room where they did the presentations, and I can recall, I'm in there now, I can recall going into the room and sort of, you're assessing, you're seeing, you're observing, and I could see, how everyone was sitting, and I can remember seeing Nathan and wondering, oh, I wonder what he's doing here, because I didn't click until when I came here that Nathan was the head of department, Nathan Matthews. That's how out of this world of the wānanga I have been. Out in another world, got no idea. And I'm sharing this with you now. I was on the outside of the circle, or where the chairs were positioned, and people were coming in, and I was trying to blend. I had dressed purposely so that I wouldn't stand out, and trying to adopt body language and fit in. I was working everything that I could, years of student experience, and I could see other people talking. Being new, of course, you don't know anyone, relatively speaking. People know you, but you don't know all the other students, and I have to accommodate and fit in. So I sat on the next to P.E. Kea, Professor P.E. Kea, who was, and I thought, is this my second supervisor? Professor P.E. Kea, Herman Clark. I'd never met him before, and I was looking for an opening point. I just sat next door. He probably was wondering, oh, is this Katarina, the one of the students I've been allocated? He was busy talking to the student next door. I didn't know that he was presenting. You're going to welcome him into the first kōrero. And Nathan opened in Te Reo, and I was wondering why he was doing that. But nevertheless, I thought he was he was, I didn't know what he was doing, but anyway, he opened up and then he left. He looked busy. So now where I want to get to is there was the student presentation that Professor P.E. Kea, Herman Clark he had done a lovely introduction for him, brought out the ukulele, and when it came to question time, I knew I had to say something. And the reason why I asked the first question, and I can't remember what came out of my mouth, to be honest, and I think it was a bit out of the box, quite academic, I suppose, in terms of asking a question about a disciplinary related matter. Where was he coming from in his talk? And I think it struck a few people, including Professor P.E. Kea, that was sitting next door to me, because I felt all eyes on me. But where I'm going with this is that I just want everyone to know, not only was it so difficult for me in terms of the whole culture, but the getting into talking, and I've mentioned that time and time again, the just coming from a world where you don't have an opportunity to speak. Very inhumane, I think. And you can speak with tangata whai ora and providers in that sort of sense, but I mean speak in the academic realms. And when you haven't done that for many years, just that speaking in that formal opportunity, and that novel was the first opening for me, and it was huge. It was huge for me in what I then built from. as I used all the years of experience as a student in building networks, everything was purposeful. Every person I spoke to from that point on, I had an agenda, and that agenda was to develop competencies, to build relationships. I don't care what level it was. It doesn't matter who I was talking to. Everything was about building to that presentation and getting back in the zone of academia. It was full on from there in terms of all of that, and I was watching, I was observing the culture, seeing, observing. It all shapes your voice. What was upcoming out of my mouth. This whole build-up was crucial, and I'm going to next of all talk about elements that were at play in this whole occasion, that were behind what I said, how I did it, and how I reacted, and how everyone else was affected. Very, very interesting experience. Thank you. Yes, I'm going to keep the roll going on this one because it's what time is it? It's 20 to 9, and I want to go for a quick dip before coming back and doing some more work. What I'm trying to do is knock out. I've got so much to do, and I've just got to keep pressing on. In the last slide, I mentioned what I would be talking about, but if I miss a few things, that's the memory. It comes, it goes, it's beyond words. I can reflect on dynamics, elements, I think I've called the word, and there was a culture of hierarchy, and as I use the word patriarchy. There were a rōpū of male students that were adopting a type of seniority, a cultural elitism in the group, and I was picking up on that and observing that and saying, oh, that's interesting, I'll have to work with that one. And what I mean by that is they were commenting when speakers were talking, they were talking about and giving feedback about Māori cultural things. And I noticed how they were doing it, top down. The sort of elite type of approach they were adopting, like know-it-alls. And please don't get offended out there, but I'm saying what my reflection points are. And it does affect someone like me, because I need to put that in my thinking tank about when I'm speaking, because here I have in my potential audience these types of listeners, these types of students. How are they going to take what I'm going to say? I'm doing all my problem solving on the ground. I'm assessing, who are the potential audience, and I'll pick up on that point later. But I was fascinated about different ones in the group, and now that'll lead up to another point. That's another element that came in. There was and there's two things. So what was happening that I noticed in this noho is that the senior staff were introducing the speakers, and they were doing a fantastic profiling job. Professor P.E. for example, Herman Clark did a wonderful, just uplifting the speaker, marvellous things said about him. Got out the ukulele, and that really helps the speaker when that happens. And I'm coming and building up to this element thing that I'm talking about. Professor Ty Black introduced this doctor from Otago. I'd never seen him before. I'd never heard about him before. He could have come off a farm the way he was dressed in gumboots. I was struck by his appearance, and I think other students were. Not only was he casual, but he was dressed from like he came out of the bush. Maybe it was a strategy, I don't know. But then Professor Ty came out with this amazing introduction. All these accolades, and I thought, bloody hell, who the hell's this? From Otago, and some, I can't remember the scientific organisation that this person was recognised in, or something. And also from Tuwharetoa, so my ears were plucked up. And oh my gosh, I was so taken aback by his arrogance when he spoke. And maybe it was the build-up to the kōrero, but I was really taken aback as someone that has been in this game for a long time. And the sheer arrogance of his kōrero, and how he spoke, I felt scared. I felt, oh, this is not someone that would be very helpful in my kōrero. And I was listening. I needed to stay the whole time just to get it was important for me to stay the whole time. But he talked about doing a doctorate in 12 weeks or something like that. And the way he talked about it was so showing off so much that, and the students were getting bought in to this, and I was thinking, bloody hell. What sort of Mickey Mouse club is this, where someone is getting up there talking about a doctorate like that, and these students have been brought in, and then the staff, I don't know what was going on in the staff heads about organising appointments for them, and students going in and talking with this fellow. He was from Tuwharetoa, and he was showing off about being from Tuwharetoa, and how he came from a certain education, and how he had overcome that education. He had failed in courses, but it was the way he was saying it that really struck me. That arrogance, that showing off. And I know our people from Tuwharetoa can be like that, but to see it like that was, I kept it all to myself, of course, but I do want to share this with you as I explain how it affected my kōrero, and that is the purpose why I'm saying it. So all of those things were happening. And there was a buzz of wow, what an amazing speaker, sort of thing. And I didn't know what they were talking about, because I thought he was pretty terrible. But anyway, I think that kōrero happened a day or two before my one. I think it was on Tuesday. No, it was on Wednesday, I think, because I was presenting the next day. But anyway, apparently he was staying, I cannot remember his name, that's the terrible thing about this post-traumatic stress, I can't remember it. But anyway, I think it was on the day after, I approached him, because he was from Tuwharetoa, and because he was doing a second doctorate apparently, and I thought, gee, I better introduce myself. So I went up to him, and his whole āhua, and I talk about other people's āhua that in chapter 1, that you can pick up straight away, that top down, that seniority sort of, I'm better than you type of thing. And I think he may have thought I was another student that was beneath him. And I introduced myself, and then I said, Katrina Simon. And then I think he was ready for me to book him at an appointment. And then I said, I'm from Te Wharatua. And he goes, oh, yes. And then I said, I'm doing a second doctorate. And you should have seen his āhua change. Very defensive, not interested in my kaupapa. It didn't last long, the kōrero, but I felt an energy of an enemy. There was no tautoko. There was, who the hell do you think you are? And I'm better than you. And for goodness sake, I thought I was the top person doing a second doctorate, and here I am talking to this woman who is doing a second doctorate ahead of me. And I thought, right, that's interesting to see that, but it does relate to what happened in my presentation. So there was a lot of background elements like this, and I think I'm going to pause here, and I'll tie it up in the conclusion slide. There was a lot of background, there were a lot of dynamics, and what you do as a speaker like myself is all of those dynamics come into play. I did a lot of building with students, and they were looking forward to my presentation. I talked a lot about what I was doing, and they were interested in synergy and kaupapa Māori research and my kōrero. There was a lot of interest in chronic mental health, and a lot of students had these sorts of things happen in their family, and I felt comfortable with the majority of that student cohort, and that was what I wanted in building up to my presentation. I worked with Virginia and Professor Virginia and Professor Tai in building, because I wasn't too sure how I was going to be presented and to the student cohort in my presentation. My supervisors weren't there, and I heard PE Care, Professor PE Care mightn't be there. So, how were they going to present me? How was I going to, how were they going to do it? I wasn't too sure. And so I'm going to, in the final slide, talk about the presentation, the day, and the dynamics. Kia ora. I'm back again. I'm not going to pause and think about what I'm going to say. I'm just going to say it because I'm going to the pause. Let me bring myself back to that day. I can remember in the morning the buzz of activity as we went into the room, and Luke, I wanted Luke to be there, and I felt the wairua around me. I did my karakia, and I remember going to the front of the room. I saw Professor Graham come in, and I knew staff would be in for the karakia, and a karakia was done by Professor Tai. And then people left for their hui, and I was looking for who was leaving, and Professor P.E. Kia left, ka pai, and I think there was a lot of problem solving going on with Professor Tai, and about how to go from here. And the absolute amazing thing is, I had no introduction. I had no, I think Professor Tai said, here's Katrina Simon, but there was no introduction for me. I was on the back foot, and I saw students sort of confused, and I started with Waiata. Now, what happened as I was singing, and I wanted, you know, what happens when you're a speaker, when you're on the back foot, and there's all these dynamics, is you pounce on that opportunity to bring the attention on you, and I thrive in those sorts of back foot opportunities. And I was feeling the build up and the fight to do well. And I started off in my Waiata, and I saw the students, I saw everyone, and I felt the energy and the interest building. And I had also bought my doctorate and a whole lot of other information that was flying around the room. And as I was singing, I noticed the Māori students that I had talked about, the Māori males, come into the room. And that's always very difficult when you're a speaker, because you get disturbances. And that student that speaker, that Tūwhara Toa doctor, came in. And I could hear one of the students go, "Yeah," about my singing, because I can sing. And I could see the Māori students, those male students, sort of, you know, put their heads down like, ugh. And I saw the doctor pick up my doctorate, have a flick through, and then sort of do his nose up at me, and walk out with the other male students. Very, very whakahihi. But that seemed to lift up the wairua. And when you have everything against you like that, you know, you don't get an introduction, you've got jeopardisation. For me, it lifts up the wairua, and from there, it just went so well. It was impromptu, organic, instinctual talking, and I rose to the occasion. I think, you know, when you're speaking in that type of context, the fact that you keep going, that you maintain decorum. My son was there, coming back and forth, and you're working that audience. Nothing's 100%, but I think it comes back to the how it works for you in the performance. The best kōrero I've ever done in that sense. You know, I've done good. You know, I am a good presenter, and you know, it took a lot out of me, my energy, but I cried in that session, and everyone else cried, which was a very telling sort of success outcome. Because when you affect people like that, it does make a difference. And I know Virginia and Tai, I could see Tai was crying, Virginia was crying. Maybe they need to reflect on how they tautoko me in that, and it comes back on that sort of thing. I know they may hear this and go, oh, but I didn't appreciate that, and I have to say it. And you know, it says a lot to students, that whole thing. but you know, on the other side, it gives you an opening. It gives you an opening in. But I say to you, Professor Tai, not good to do that sort of thing. You could have made a bit more of an effort in introducing me better than that, and crying after later isn't going to help in that sense. It sort of lowered my respect to you, if I must say. And I don't care who hears that. Yeah, I did feel a little bit like I deserved a little bit more of an introduction in, but it worked for me anyway. The thing about all of that is you learn, you learn. I have to finish with this point. We had the cup of tea and we left after and all of that sort of thing. I had some makutu that evening, and I think that there is a tapu element to everything, and I managed to, you know, get through that. But it is a tapu kōrero that my research is about, and there is whakahihi along the way. It's all good. It's all part of research and part of the business of being Māori and talking about Māori topics. And I hope this feedback is not only honest, but is helpful as part of examination. And I look forward to potentially debating it further. Kia ora.